this was an emotional train ride. Orphan Train by Christina Baker, a #1 New York bestseller. This was a good insight. It even had things here in the back that kind of showed you the real life train of how it went, like train riders with their people that pretty much put them up for adoption. It's gonna, in this book, it tells you about a boy who shines shoes for a living, like a 10-year-old boy. Kind of, here's a real life version of that. I just read this, literally just finished it tonight. So so it's, this part of it's kind of still fresh in my brain. And the majority of people who rode this train, which is probably why it's so enriched in my own family history, and then why I get so emotionally involved with it, is Irish Catholics usually rode this train during the years of 1850 to 1939. And this would be like a poster that they would post of all the train stations to tell people they want them to adopt. And this is like, just like the girl in the story, this is like a little girl who has to earn money by sewing, like a little 10-year-old girl, and like a rare picture of all the kids lined up next to the train. Like, and the author of this book really did her research. She interviewed a whole lot of survivors from the train and their descendants. And then this story is about this little girl who, it took her until she was in her 50s. This organization finally gave her her real birth certificate. And then this is that little girl with her new family in Minnesota. And then that's where this story pretty much takes place, in Minnesota, and then later in Maine. So this girl right here, she, as a 10-year-old girl, had to ride this train. She born in Ireland, came over with her parents, and her she has the Irish pendant, like with the heart and the two hands and the crown, like little necklace, and that's the only thing she has left of her biological grandmother. And she goes with her siblings and her parents to New York, and then they ended up all dying, except for her little sister, which she finds out way later, like in her 90s, that she from this other girl who also is like a main character in this novel. Her next door neighbors that were like Polish or German immigrants or something like that ended up adopting her and lying to her, and then they just gave her to the Children's Society, which is pretty much the people who like put all the kids in the train. And the Orphan Train pretty much started in New York, and every like major city or small little town stops at churches, and the major cities kind of like at the train depot, and all the children would line up in a row from like tallest to youngest and whatnot, or tallest to shortest, and pretty much get scrutinized by these townfolk people of are they strong enough? Will they be able to handle this? Their teeth, their looks, and all that. Would this child pass off as like our biological child and stuff? Which I personally think is just wrong. And then this girl, and then like the boys would get adopted first. The babies would get adopted, then the boys, and then like the girls would either get put back on the train to the next town, or, and once like they reached Oregon or somewhere on the West Coast, if they didn't get adopted, they just get put on the train and go straight back to New York and have to live in the foster home or foster orphan house. And this girl, first her birth name was Nave. And then the couple who adopted her right off the bat, treated her horribly. They renamed her Dorothy, which I think is just wrong. Like, yeah, if you were gonna adopt a kid, their last name will change, obviously, but their name, like their first name, shouldn't be changed, in my opinion. And this little boy that was with her, got adopted, or not adopted, but fostered from this farm people who ended up beating the crap out of him, and he ends up just running away and living life as like a kid who shines shoes. And she ends up, that couple who took her in and changed her name to Dorothy, pretty much just treated her like an employee for their sewing company. And she was not allowed to live where they lived, like upstairs. She was, where their bedrooms and such are. She was allowed to eat in the kitchen that was like downstairs, and had to roll out a mat every night to sleep on it and roll it back up once the other employees started showing up. And she ends up just basically being their employee. And then the woman's always put a padlock on the fridge so she could never eat, and only eat at the designated meal times, and she would end up getting really, really thin. So the child's society took her back and she kept the name Dorothy for like the next place. Oh yeah, and they never sent her to school, and she's 10 years old. She was like, we just need an employee right now. It's already in the middle of semester. Like, you don't need to go to school yet. And so the society people pick her back up and take her to this other place that was a million times much worse, in my opinion. The guy, meanwhile, remember, 10 years old. And then the father of that family, the mother just kept giving birth, all the, like, back to back to back, and would not get out of bed. The father of that family quit his job and was basically like just having the family live off of the land, and made a pass at her and almost raped her. And then she ran away to her schoolhouse. At least they sent her to school, though, right? And the teacher brought her back to the, her like little, like back then there used to be these houses where single women could go live at. So she ends up bringing her back to that house. She stays there for a minute, and she ends up getting adopted to these other couple who has like in a convenience store, and she ends up, and this is like, gets full on adopted by them, and they change her name to their deceased daughter, who would have been the same age as her, Vivian. And then that's where the Vivian name comes in towards the end, because she lived until she was like 100 years old, and she ended up moving to Maine with her second husband. Her first husband was the little boy who they found each other a little later in their 20s, and he ends up going to World War II, and ends up dying. She ends up giving her child up for adoption from that marriage, and ends up marrying his war buddy, who helps her with the family store and brings it up to a modern era with like technology and all that. And never tells them that she gives them up for adoption. And this is what my brain, I'm thinking, like, okay, the two main characters, they have to be connected then, because she would be the age of a great grandma for this other girl who is, it jumps back from the 1920 to and follows Vivian's point of view, and then jumps back to 2011, and goes off of Molly's point of view and follows Molly's story, which is pretty much the same story. She's like half Native American and like half like white, and her dad dies. Her mom is a drug addict that goes in and out of prison, and then she also is in the foster care system of what is considered today, and jumps back and forth to all these different people, and then she ends up meeting her, helping her clean out her closet. Molly ends up meeting Vivian, helping Vivian clean out her closet, and her attic, I mean, and they end up bonding. And when she finds out that Vivian, or in the book, when we kind of find out that Vivian had a kid and ended up giving the kid up for adoption, in my brain, I'm thinking, like, this is Molly's great-grandma. Like, they just don't know it yet, and I'm waiting for that to happen, but it never happens. That's not the case. They're just connected through their stories, because their stories are so similar. And her dad dies, and he's like Native American, and and she ends up following that kind of religious pattern of Native Americans, and she ends up doing really, really good in school once she's out of her foster care system and into the woman's house, and pretty much ends up just living with her, and it never gets reported that she's living with her, and when the foster parents kick her out, and so they're just like bankrolling in the money, and so they kind of just kept it hush hush, and they end up finding Maeve's, Dorothy's, Vivian's, all same woman, 3 different names, daughter, and they all end up meeting, and it's kind of very much a happy story towards the end. I'm leaving a lot out, but trust me, this is quite a read, and it's an emotional read for sure. It's a very, very thin book, but it is heavy in the heart. But I will highly recommend it. It's The Orphan Train by Christina Baker Kline.